Good evening, all. First of all, apologies for a few IT issues. Of course, you think everything's going to go well, but as in life, nothing ever does. I know you're all joining us, and welcome to Climate Responsive Retrofit, our interdisciplinary University Design Challenge 2023. So Timber Development UK is an amalgamation or a merger of TRADA, which is the Timber Research and Development Association, and the Timber Trade Federation. We have a brand new logo, a brand new website, and hopefully we're uniting the timber supply chain from those who grow the seed all the way through to post-occupancy evaluation, and further than that, into retrofit. And of course, my slides do not forward, but here we go. So our big challenge, retrofit is essential. It's not easy, it's far more challenging than new build, and it takes a team of knowledgeable, caring professionals to accomplish schemes that work. We need our future professionals to understand the complexity and embrace the constraints and challenges. Timber Development UK, in partnership with the AECB, that's the Association for Environment Conscious Building, BEST, which I'll let Sara explain, NMITE, which is the New Model Institute of Technology and Engineering, Edinburgh Napier University, and the Passivhaus Trust. And we have software support from Trimble, the Passivhaus Institute, and the AECB. So what is our challenge? We're asking you to come and join us, join a team of 4 to 8 members to design, engineer, and cost a retrofit scheme for an existing timber frame building that requires a second life. It's the old cricket pavilion in Hereford, and you can see the web link, but we all post it in the chat later. If you have any questions and answers, any questions, please post them in the Q&A, and we'll come to it at the end of our webinar. So tonight, with webinar 1, why, who, and how? Our architect, Sara Edmonds from BEST, our engineer, Natasha Watson from Burro Happold, and our landscape architect, Kate Blackburne from Exterior Architecture, will talk you through their roles and how, well, why, who, and how you go about it. Sara, I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to you, if that's okay.
Yes, hello everybody. We're all having some tech issues tonight. My computer's being really slow. All right. Here we go. Yeah, so Tabs asked me to speak tonight about the role of the architect in retrofit. So my name is Sara Edmonds, and yeah, I guess I am an architect, although that definition is a bit less of an appropriate fit these days, but I'm certainly a retrofit advocate, and I do work in the built environment. So one of the hats that I wear is as a technical consultant with Built Environment Smarter Transformation. And Built Environment Smarter Transformation, essentially our mission is to accelerate to zero. So we provide the connections, infrastructure, and the culture needed to solve some of the sector's most pressing challenges. And through the information that Tab's already shared and information that you'll get throughout the course of the challenge, you'll find out more about BEST and what the resources are that we currently have available. Now, you'll probably have been made aware of the Learning Hub, but we can share information about that again later, where you can actually access some incredible quality training completely free at the point of access. You just need to make an account, sign up, and you can access those things. So yeah, and I also do some work with some of the other organizations that Tab has mentioned, but namely the Architects Climate Action Network. I'm a coordinator there. So yeah, enough about me. So yeah, the role of the architect in retrofit. So I don't know, I'm sure a lot of this information is already, you know, a well-trodden territory for a lot of you on the call, but you know, we're responsible for quite a lot of emissions in the construction industry, about 40%, however way you chop it, we're basically responsible for quite a lot. And we often hear about the impact of making personal choices around reducing our individual carbon footprints. But I really like this diagram here from the Architects Declare practice guide, because on the left you can see that the average footprint, carbon footprint, a term that has been cleverly designated by the fossil fuel industry to put the responsibility on the individual shoulders. But you can see that this thing that we're all become familiar with, this carbon footprint, it's relatively small in the context of the impact of an average large project in an architectural practice, which can have in excess of 2,500 tonnes of carbon equivalent emissions in just the embodied carbon of a project. So we can start to see why it's really important to interrogate the nature of the projects that we work on and consider their whole life impact. So currently the systems that we operate within are based on a linear approach of extraction, manufacture, construction, demolition, and disposal. But we really do need to be moving away. And I sort of feel like I'm preaching to the converted. I don't think anybody believes that this is the way that we need to be operating, but we do need to. I think repetitive messaging is really important in this space, just to remind us, like, no, this isn't okay. So we really do need to move away from this linear approach towards a circular and regenerative set of systems. And you can see, like, to what end are we going to go if we continue on this sort of resource extraction to waste? There isn't it's a finite planet, so we really do need to be moving towards a more circular approach. So isn't it time to consider building nothing new? And I do really like this question, because it makes you really consider, what does it mean to build nothing new? It doesn't mean, okay, everybody down tools, walk away, there's nothing left to be done. There certainly is a lot to be done, but we need to understand what we're building with. We need to understand the impact that our approach to projects, how we specify those projects, where our materials are coming from. I often say that, like, there's never been a more creative time to be an architect, because you have everything you need in front of you. The building that you design, the shiny new thing, does not make you an architect. The way you think makes you an architect. So this comes down to the approach that architects generally take anyway. So there's the traditional thinking of, like, okay, I have this problem, there's my solution. But actually, we understand that the planet is an interconnected, we've woven web of systems, and we need to be thinking that way as well. We need to be absolutely developing our thought processes this way. And I think that architects are important in this space, because we do approach things in this sort of holistic way. And this is a key part of the approach to retrofit. See, I suppose we haven't actually defined necessarily what retrofit is, but technically you could describe it as the installation of new systems designed to increase energy efficiency and reduce demand. Now, I don't really like that definition, if I'm honest, because it fails to describe the full potential impact of retrofit. Retrofit can be a lens through which you can examine the structural systems in which we operate, as we've just seen, and how we do that as built environment professionals. So again, this is kind of a useful slide to consider, that retrofit provides the opportunity to address a myriad of issues, from improved air quality and biodiversity protection, health security, affordable housing. There's a lot of things that we can start to address through the lens of retrofit, and that's what's really, really exciting about it. I have given some examples, because I'm sure there are some architects on the call right now, and we all love, like, a nice picture of a nice building. Although I have to admit that I haven't been doing this much of sort of like, oh, and this is the promotion of the buildings, but I actually really love this building. And there is a lovely use of timber in it as well. This is Battersea Art Centre. And we have just got, like, I remember when Hayward, the first time I ever visited the Young Vic by Hayward Tompkins as well, years ago, and it was so controversial, because people were like, you're just going to leave the walls like that? Really? You're not going to put, like, lots of shiny plaster all over it? And I really just think there's something beautiful about the storytelling that retrofit also offers. This is a NMITE, which is the gold standard of retrofit, if you like, social housing scheme. And the image on the left is the before, and the image on the right is the after. So, you know, it's a personal taste about what you feel about like the finish of buildings, but the fact that you can be so transformative with something without going through the destructive process of demolition and the potential for reuse is there. And also you are not, you know, the communities that live there still get to be part of that space that is so, you know, intrinsically valued. And then this is a personal favorite of mine as well. For anybody who doesn't know the Zero Carbon House by John Christophers in Birmingham, it's just such an incredibly beautiful space. The interior is what's really special about it for me, because it's sort of John has extended his family home, but the materials that are used within there, they're sort of like rammed earth floors and just natural materials everywhere. And it's the most beautiful space to be inside. And it's there's so much opportunity, I think, for creative reuse in a project like this. So John very kindly gives tours of his home. So if you find yourself in Birmingham, it's actually worth the trip to just make your way up there and have a look. But I also want to just show examples of, you know, those are very building specific ideas of retrofit, but retrofit really is so much more than that. It's the spaces between the buildings. It's how you engage with communities in the spaces. It's the streets. It's the place-based approach to things, and the opportunities for social cohesion and community building. A lot of these images are taken from my good friends at Civic Square. Again, do yourself a favor and check out their work. But there's so many opportunities to really expand your thinking around what retrofit really means. And it's a really, really exciting place to be. So this sort of like a whistle-stop tour of the kind of broad range of things that retrofit can be, but the architect's place within that is your holistic approach to thinking, and that's really what's so desperately needed. And that's enough for me, I think.
Thanks, Sarah. A lot to think about, and yeah, definitely the system thinking. Natasha.
Yep, sure. I will share my screen. So yes, in response to you know, the architect's role, I'll now talk about the engineer's role. And I kind of wanted to focus more on how I mean, I've been working as an engineer since 2010 now, and a lot has changed. And I think that it's rather than sort of talking about what an engineer does, I think I wanted to talk more about how an engineer is changing, and especially in response to retrofitting as well. And a bit like Sarah said, you know, a building doesn't make the architect, it's how you think that makes you an architect. 100%, that is exactly how I view engineering. You put it in such a nice way. Thank you. I might steal it. So yeah, a little bit about engineer's role. I will, just in case you haven't heard of us, talk a little bit about Burro Happold. Pretty big. So San Francisco all the way to Melbourne now. We've got offices in lots of different sectors. Lots of different offices are in the UK as well. And we do lots of different things in the built environment too. But what we're seeing is actually, I think, a really exciting stage of growth where we're seeing how all of our different specialties are coming together to provide new advisory roles and new ways of working together, which I think it's actually, you know, the way that we can now talk to each other a lot more online. Offices that have those different disciplines might not have ever really spent that much time together. So that's one of the reasons why from February this year, I was made the UK embodied carbon lead for structures as well, because I felt like I could actually, thanks Tab, I felt like I could actually support the rest of my fellow officers in being able to provide that. And that's kind of led on to sort of planning, application, advisory, reuse, feasibility, and much more as well. So, what is changing about the role of the engineer? Well, we are focusing a lot more on carbon reduction. So hopefully this graph on the right-hand side should look quite familiar. It was provided by the Green Construction Board in the UK, and it's also been used by the World Green Building Council. But it's a way of, I think, very simply showing how the sooner you talk about carbon, the bigger the impact you can have, following these kind of 4 different tenets of construction. So one is to build nothing, rethink what we actually need our spaces for. Second one, build less, which is a really which really kind of focuses on retrofitting and reusing the kind of valuable spaces that we have now. Moving on to building clever, where we look at lower impact building materials such as timber, and then building efficiently. So making sure that once we've done all of that, we don't sort of take our foot off the pedal. We are actually making sure that we're using that timber efficiently as well. So yes, with this particular brief that you've all been set, you're aiming to create a multifunctional community space, and you may double the footprint of the pavilion, but doubling is a maximum. If you don't need to use that additional space, maybe don't use it. Definitely interrogate exactly how much space you do need when you're looking at the brief. Second point, what's changing about the role of the engineer? So typically we would get involved a little bit later in projects, a little bit later than architects, and we would sort of ramp up our sort of resource, our effort on those projects to really sort of drill down into the calculations and that technical design. But what we're finding now is actually we're being employed very much earlier now on projects, and we're spending that time, thankfully, talking to clients, talking to architects, and really focusing on making sure that the right options at that concept, making sure the right concept options are the ones been taken forward. And if we are going to be sort of touching the earth lightly, reducing the amount of material we're putting in our buildings, reducing the amount of space we're creating in the first place, it does mean that actually we're not going to be churning and churning and churning out sort of reams and reams of calculations for massive buildings. We are hopefully going to spend that time thinking, spend that time discussing and formulating options, and then we will be doing very choice and very particular and very focused studies where we do need to put those interventions. The third point, it's pretty much similar to being involved earlier. We're more about the why rather than just the how. So in particular reference to retrofitting of buildings, versus new buildings, I quite like this way of looking at the requirements and then the space you create. So on quite a few projects that I've worked on in the past, and unfortunately will probably still hopefully work on less and less, it is a case of taking unchallenged requirements and then creating a new building to suit those requirements. When you've got an existing building, you can't really do that. You should adjust your requirements for that building that you already have. So in the case of this particular project, we are focusing on this pavilion, but it does mean that we need to be very, very sure that we don't get, when we look at new buildings, don't get suckered into the greenwash. That image up there looks very lovely, but actually if you dive a bit deeper, it's got very large spans. It looks like it's all concrete. They've essentially greenwashed by putting lots of trees everywhere. So just focus on that. New buildings may look very fancy, but they're designed in that way to try and get you engaged and trying to draw you in. But hopefully by working on this particular project, you'll fall in love with the really creative and really unusual spaces that you can create when you're retrofitting a building. We are also improving our different levels of reuse understanding. So when we typically work on retrofitting buildings, especially if you haven't worked on one before, it might be quite easy to fall into that kind of binary way of thinking, either reuse everything or demolish and start again. But actually, this is quite an old concept model by Brand from 1995, looking at buildings as a series of layers. And these layers have differing permanence. So going from the social, so the people inside, and then the stuff and the space plan, you know, they can be changed. Well, people will flow sort of continuously through a building. But, you know, when you're looking at your space plan, maybe you change that every 5 to 10 years. Then going into your services and your facade materials, maybe that's every 15 to 25. And then structure, typically 60. And then going into your site and surroundings, which, you know, hopefully will be there forever. When you're looking at those different levels of permanence, maybe try and ask yourself different questions. You know, which side should be the entrance for this new pavilion for the optimum engagement with the site? When you're looking at, there we go. When we look at the sort of services, do the lights still work? Do we need to replace them? Do we need to have a new heating system? What is it going to be used for? You know, does it have to be like 20%, 20 degrees C, you know, 365 degrees, 365 days of the year in that space? Maybe not. Looking at potentially reusing the windows if you are going to be replacing them. Are there any fabric upgrades that are needed? Where exactly are they needed? Are they needed everywhere? Asking yourself these different questions based on the different layers of the building will hopefully mean that you really interrogate what's there and what actually needs to be replaced. And then finally, even though I'm the UK Embodied Carbon lead, I know more than, well, I know, like hopefully lots of other people, that carbon isn't the be all and end all when we're talking about sustainability. Unfortunately, I have definitely seen a lot of people getting what's known as carbon tunnel vision, where it's to the detriment of lots of different other really quite pressing issues. I've circled a couple here, which I think might be relevant to your brief and the projects that you'll be producing. However, it's not up to me, it's up to you. So yeah, hopefully you won't get the carbon tunnel vision, really sort of embrace all of the challenges and all the opportunities that you can find on this project. So thank you very much. That was me.
Thanks, Natasha.
No problem.
And Kate, the landscape architect, often gets left out of the picture altogether.
Indeed. Well, not so much these days. Okay, so is that working, Tab?
Perfect.
Cool. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Kate Blackburne, landscape architect from Exterior Architecture. Yeah, so as Tab was just saying, I suppose landscape architects historically have been kind of forgotten about sometimes on schemes, but it's great to see now that things are changing with the backing of sort of new policies and directives from the government. Landscape is now very important on, you know, all new developments and retrofit developments as well. So looking at opportunities for you know, introducing sustainable and climate change mitigation measures on all schemes is something that we take very seriously. So our practice, we work across a range of schemes, big scale, small scale, you know, huge campuses down to residential developments, and some retrofit as well. I've got some examples of that in this presentation. So as Natasha's just been talking about the changing role of the engineer, I thought I'd do a similar thing for the landscape architect. So as I mentioned previously, these policies are really helping us to have our seat at the table has become much more important, I suppose. We're being involved in projects a lot earlier to make sure that new schemes can meet these policies set out by the government. And then in London, we've also got the urban greening factor policy too. So the biodiversity net gain policy says that all new developments must have a 10% net increase in biodiversity across the site, which is something that's calculated by the project ecologist. They'll look at what the baseline habitat is that's on the site, and then we'll work with them to make sure that we can retain or exceed that as part of the new development. So there's a whole kind of metric involved in that. But basically, if we just look at kind of the value of different habitat types, an amenity lawn is a much lower value than a woodland, for instance. Those are kind of the two ends of the scale. There's also things like sustainability certifications that help landscape come to the forefront as well. For example, the BREEAM accreditation that looks at things like, well, there are credits that the project can achieve for things such as retaining existing habitats on site, having sustainable urban drainage systems, and what else is landscape? Oh, material types. So the materials that we select, the type of pavers that we select, those kind of things, that all factors into the BREEAM rating for a scheme. As well as life cycle analysis and carbon calculations, which are very important in retrofit schemes, and something that retrofit schemes tend to do quite well in as well. So in kind of the broader picture of sustainability, these are kind of the key landscape focus areas, or the different things that we would focus on. So obviously environment is probably the key one for us. So thinking about green and blue infrastructure on a wide scale, trying to provide a high level of biodiversity and increasing habitat areas, having a resilient and high quality microclimate, water sensitive design, all of those kind of things. Carbon's probably next on the list for us. So thinking about low embodied carbon materials and low energy use strategies in the landscape as well. Social sustainability is also very important and something that's key in landscape design, and definitely for this cricket pavilion as well. So thinking about how people are going to be using the site, thinking about communities, thinking about safety and overlooking and those kind of things too. Zero waste and circular is a very interesting one, and particularly in retrofit. So obviously we're reusing the existing building, but perhaps there are other features on the site that you may be thinking about getting rid of. And the landscape is an excellent tool to use for rehoming those on site rather than sending them to the landfill. So for instance, trees that might need to be removed to make way for the new building, absolutely we should be looking to keep that deadwood on site. It makes a fantastic habitat feature for invertebrates and beetles. But equally built materials, bricks can be recycled as paving treatments. Timber or crushed aggregate can be used in surface treatments or as edges to planting. And it's our role as designers really to think about the creative kind of reuses for those features and put them forward to our clients. I was actually on a call today where we were talking about reusing a concrete slab as a gravel edge to some biodiverse roofs. So there you go, that's all real. And then economic too, so everything obviously has a cost. So thinking about how we can use sustainability as a cost-saving measure on our schemes. So I thought I'd just break down the way that we kind of look at sustainability and landscape architecture under the headings of mitigation and adaptation. So if mitigation is about reducing our impacts in terms of climate change, and adaptation is about adapting to the way that the climate is kind of changing. So in terms of mitigation, probably a big one for us is thinking about how we can use green and blue infrastructure rather than engineered solutions. No offense, Sara, it's probably working really closely with the engineer, actually, the civil engineer, to think about how we can use particularly blue infrastructure to manage surface water. Climate change means in the UK, we have much more chance of flooding events, and Tab's also mentioned that the site is prone to flooding. So thinking about how that water can be captured on site, slowed down, preventing it from running off the site, keeping it on the site as much as we can, and even perhaps maybe filtering it or cleansing it in some way. So introducing planting that might filter it, or sort of beds and things that the water can move through to treat it before it's returned to the groundwater. And same with green infrastructure as well. So trees and planting are great for temperature regulation inside buildings too. Biodiverse roofs are great for bringing down internal temperatures and keeping the heat in as well. And trees outside of buildings have been proven to reduce kind of heating and cooling requirements internally too. As well as people sitting outside, obviously you get shade and the heat benefits. Low carbon materials and practices. I was trying to think of what might be useful to include on this. I think if you're looking for a resource for what type of materials are good from a sustainability perspective, I think the Green Guide is quite a good place to look. Their website actually lists different materials based on categories. Not sure about the other ones, but the landscaping one that we've got, I've put a screenshot of in here. It just lists all of the different types of materials that you might be specifying in the landscape and gives them a rating just to get kind of a general idea of where different things sit in relation to one another. It's quite a good place to go. But as I mentioned before as well, you know, upcycling, recycling materials, and also specifying plants that are grown locally and are endemic to the area is a great way to do that too. Zero waste and circular. So yeah, creative reuse of demolition material. This is some of my colleagues on one of our sites building an insect hotel that's got some deadwood from across the site, some other trees that need to be removed. It was actually kept on the site and then reused in this insect hotel. I think you can also see some bricks there that are from the site too. So thinking about some creative ways to reuse anything that needs to be removed. In terms of green infrastructure, I think probably it's most important to look at planting types and tree types that are most suited to the site. They're going to do the best under those conditions. And they also help to kind of establish the character of the site too, rather than making it feel like, I don't know, you're in a different country or a different part of the UK even. So the best place to look for that will be the Hereford Biodiversity Action Plan. I put a link in this presentation at the end to that, but it's got all of the kind of key target habitats that they're looking at in the area, and should give some idea of species, both flora and fauna, that would be good to support on the site. So adaptation to the risk of flooding and extreme water events. I think I already mentioned this, but yeah, managing surface water runoff on the site as much as you can, dealing with those flood events in creative ways. I'm just going to skip through that one. Oh yeah, so talking about green roofs and green walls, I don't know if there's scope to have a green roof on the building perhaps, but yeah, it is a great way to reduce urban heating and provide temperature regulation internally to the building. And this is one of our retrofit schemes, probably our most extreme example, where it's an existing a pre-existing podium with a car park above it. And as you can see before, it wasn't a very nice place. This were some rainy day photos, so that makes things look a bit worse. But this is what it's like now. So you can see the car park structure underneath. And obviously what this involved was working really closely with the engineer to make sure that we could support all of this new weight. Planting in soil was very heavy. So if you're thinking of, you know, designing something with trees on the roof, definitely pays to think structurally, how's that going to work? What do we need to support it? Some more photos of that. Adaptation to water scarcity. So yeah, thinking about where the water's coming from and where it's going to, perhaps using the building, perhaps thinking about blue roof systems, or capturing and harvesting water for irrigation purposes, and that kind of thing is something that we often think about. And then I suppose kind of overarching all of this, that's lots of talk about kind of sustainability and carbon and those kind of things. But what is equally as important is how the space is going to be used. Given that your site is a cricket pavilion, it's going to be a very social space. It's going to be a very community orientated space. So what we want to avoid is doing something that's very much in favour of nature and, you know, leaving out all of the people. So we've got to think about how these two things can kind of come together and work in harmony, actually make the, you know, the climate change reducing measures a feature and something for people to enjoy and inhabit. This is one example of where I think we've done that quite well. One of our schemes, the section across the bottom, it was a floodable amphitheatre approach for a campus. So it's a sunken space with terrace seating around the edges where people can go and sit. But the whole thing was designed to be floodable and to hold a certain amount of water in the case of certain weather events. So that's just one example. I mean, there's definitely ways you're going to have, I suppose, space for people to spectate and things associated with the cricket pavilion. So probably thinking about seating and how that kind of relates to the different measures that you're thinking about, framing views, those kind of things as well. And that's it. Those are some links to some of the things that I mentioned there as well.
Thanks, Kate. And it's why, yes, landscape architects so need to be involved as we move to a new way of understanding the built environment. I'm just going to share a few slides about the pavilion and the challenge, and I'd invite our audience to put any questions they might have in the question and answer box, and then we'll put them to all panelists. So you'll see in the brief, if you go to the Timber Development UK website and click on, the brief will come up for everybody. And on our left, you can see an image from Google Street View. So because the pavilion sits on that triangle land, you can almost get 360 degrees around it. So you can see it from every single site. The photographs are really quite up to date. And it sits on that triangle of land, which we would like you to reimagine for biodiversity, climate mitigation, as Kate talked about, all the things that landscape can currently do. There are some existing trees. You might want to look at removing some of them. They are birch. Some of them are birch, which will do not have a long life span. There's an oak tree to I want to say that's like the northwest of the building, which you probably won't want to remove. And you can see the photographs from Britain Above, from historic England on the right, when the pavilion was first built. And behind it, you can see the cider, where they used to manufacture cider. I mean, it's a huge, huge, great area. That is now housing. And the grounds in front of it are more used now as football fields. I'm not sure there's much cricket played any longer. So the community love the building. It has had a rebuild already once in its life. It is timber framed. We will talk more about it in webinar 4. We will have it airtightness tested. You will know what all the materials that make it up are. Timber is great in so many aspects, but it doesn't react well to water when you put it in the wrong place. So at the moment, there's some raised pathways, and that is impounding onto the 6 inches or 150 mil, which we say you should keep timber above the ground. So some of that cladding on the front there is rotting. We've been asked to keep the front of the building as it is. That doesn't mean that you can't enclose that, the front sort of area. So you could put windows on the front of it, but basically you cannot extend it past the front boundary. You can extend on the sides up to 0.5 metre, and then at the rear up to double the footprint if you require it. What do the community want? A multifunctional community space that they can come together and use for multiple community purposes. There is gas to the building, there is water to the building, and there's electric to the building. How you want to work with that, obviously, will be up to you and your team to decide. So each team will receive software packages from our sponsors and workshops in how to use them. Now, what I've found throughout my career is you can have software and it doesn't necessarily work together or integrate. So why Trimble SketchUp? Because SketchUp is used within Design PH, which is the part of the Passivhaus planning package. And why the AECB carbon calculator? Because that again can plug into the Passivhaus planning package, so you get all three combined together to give you an outcome that works, as opposed to sort of fighting against each other. But some of the developers of that software will be your tutors in those workshops. And where can you find all the information on it? Head to the Timber Development UK website. You will find it under Education and under Challenges. So you can see there it is on the left. You can see also that our two previous challenges, one was a big community centre, 800 square metres, and the one in Sunderland was about a single house. I'm going to stop sharing screen and see if we have any questions, or actually maybe we've got questions for each other. So I think we've got a very shy audience. Nobody's come in with anything. But have you got any questions that, Sarah, you'd like to ask our landscape architect or our engineer?
I don't really have a question, but I suppose it's just a reflection on the different presentations, and as I don't know like exactly who's in the audience, but I recall when I was studying architecture that I really hated group projects. And I really hated them because we were never really given as clear a brief or operating in the space around what was so crucial about operating as a group. And I think now I would really love this because everything that Kate talked about and Natasha talked about makes more sense in the context of things like retrofit, of things like low carbon projects, zero carbon projects, retrofit projects. And it's really interesting because all these questions that you might have as an architect, you know, your landscape architects and your engineers can really help to fill those gaps and the stuff that you can bring together. It's just a great opportunity for learning, and we really, really need that learning now, I think, because we're kind of in the forefront of this space. It's not common practice. I mean, I think because we all talk about it quite a lot, we probably feel like it is common practice, but it isn't. So I think the opportunity to start to work this way and then to take that learning through your careers is just something I wish that I had. So yeah, I just as a reflection, but I think we do have some questions now.
They are coming in now, thick and fast. So, and I've managed to spotlight everybody, the speakers. So again, Deepak. So Deepak, I know you took part in last year's challenge, so great to see you back again. We must be doing something right. What might be the overarching aims of the competition? So from my point of view, it's to get disciplines to start talking to each other and to understand each other's language, to not feel vulnerable, not to actually be fighting against each other, but to come together to collaborate. I'd also like you to understand, like retrofit, it will probably be one of the biggest challenges of your career, your future careers. And then I'd like you to understand natural materials, their benefits, but also their drawbacks, you know, where you would use them and where you would choose not to use them. But I don't know if our speakers would like to add to that.
I think you're hit the nail on the head, really.
Yeah, I suppose kind of just echoing what Sara said before about collaboration. I think none of our disciplines can reach their true sustainability potential in isolation. So yeah, we get the most out of working together, and you know, as Natasha said, we can draw trees on top of buildings all that we want, but actually making sure that they work is half the task. So yeah, I think this competition is very cool and a great opportunity to test that out.
So that's from my ACAN coordination. It's like I agree. That's like so we have an anonymous. How many people should the community space hold? I don't know. That's again up to you. The footprint is just under 150 square meters, so you could potentially double it up to 300 square meters. I don't know. I'm not a design professional. How much 300 square meters got a hold? The community haven't said that, so we can't really answer that one. I don't know if anybody else has got clearer. How much square, you know, people standing don't need much space, people sitting need more space.
Yeah, so the pavilion looks over a cricket pitch, is that right, Kate?
It looks over a green grassy area, which was originally a cricket pitch, but is now a sort of a common that's often used for football and other sports games.
Okay, but it could be a good site for spectators to watch sport and that kind of thing. Yeah, so I suppose it depends on how you anticipate that the space might be used. Once you go and you visit it or look at, you know, imagery online, and sort of testing that out spatially, seeing what it can actually hold, what it can support, and then going from there. If it is an appropriate location for spectating, then perhaps we design to let it support that.
Yeah, that'll be an engineering challenge. Oliver, thank you. And does the community have an intended use for the building? No. Multifunctional. Again, adaptable, useful, warm, possibly producing more energy than it consumes, easy to maintain, long-lived.
Hap, I wonder I mean, it's you know, it's a competition, and it's for you to kind of compile your response to the project overall. But like, you know, there's an opportunity when you kind of dig down into some of the stuff that I was talking about, and I think there's a question coming a little bit later on around engagement with the community. But if you kind of see the project as an opportunity to also expand our knowledge and the fullest understanding of how important retrofit is as something that takes place within the community, then, you know, maybe you can choose to tell us the answer to some of those questions. So how much do you want it, how many people can be in there based on, and of course there will be spatial considerations and safety considerations, but perhaps it's more about what you want it to do, not just what you're going to do to the building, but how that building becomes an integrated part of any community, and taking those principles through to sort of question some of those other bits around space ownership and the sort of more broad social considerations.
Any Natasha, Kate, do you want to?
I suppose it's just about justifying your approach, isn't it? And being clear where you're coming from and why you think that that's appropriate, and not doing something that's not appropriate for the site or the scale of the site or the use of the site, the character of the site, you know, those kind of things.
And you will have drawings. Ideally, we will get you a SketchUp model of the existing building. So again, you'll have the drawings and the sizes, and you know, you can work out what is already there and what you can remove and what you want to sort of change. Sara, where was the social housing complex you referred to?
Yeah, hi, Cyprian. It's Ernley Close, I think, is in Manchester. And I think it might be like one of the first NMITE social housing schemes. I can look it up exactly and share it in the chat. Talk amongst yourselves.
And if we can't share it in the chat, we will pop it in the you know, the mail out afterwards. And Deepak, you were saying, apart from NMITE, I think that relates to your earlier question. So there are two standards that that we know about that are sort of, you know, that are robust and replicable. So the NMITE standard or the AECB standard. Now we've got webinars coming up from the Passivhaus Trust and the AECB in our following weeks. So you'll deep dive into both of those, and then you get to choose. You know, so justify what you as a team think the community is that would be relevant to communities and communities going forward as the climate changes, and what standards you are going to retrofit to. So we've also got anonymous. You are not already in a team. So what we ask is individuals to register their interest. We have space for 20 teams, and those teams should consist of a minimum of 4 and a maximum of 8. We encourage you to form interdisciplinary teams, so because that's the best way to learn from each other. We always have lots of architects get involved and a good lot of engineers. We always struggle a few with landscape architects and end up chasing them down. So if you know any of them or any of them are on your campus, go and make friends with them. Quantity surveyors and project managers, because you know the project manager makes sure it gets done and delivered. The quantity surveyor and or the cost consultant, you know, shows you what budget you're working to. And then there's multiple other disciplines that you can bring in as well. We will work on teams on the 6th and the 7th of December. So again, we've got a talk and some understanding on how to help get you into teams. So please don't worry about that. Next question from another anonymous attendee. So you're very, very shy, you know. Yeah, so engaging community is important, but how do projects actually do this, and how much does this influence design? Any conflict or divergent, and how do you handle any conflict or divergent opinions? I was aimed at Sarah, but
love this question. Because I think when people hear about engagement and community engagement, particularly, everybody goes, "Ah, no, my God, how do we do that?" It is, yeah, it's a whole. It's not something that we make enough space for in design generally, because in our current value systems and how we value projects, we don't center the experience of occupants and building users enough, because it doesn't look, nobody likes to fund the time that it takes to do decent, proper community engagement. It doesn't look like you're doing anything and you can't get it on the bottom line anywhere, but it's absolutely crucial. And there are a set of skills in order to carry out that sort of thing, and it is something that needs to be considered from the get-go. Now, it doesn't mean that you say that residents are engaged through every moment of the project, because frankly they wouldn't be interested. It's not part of it, of the whole process in that way, but there are key times, and those times are important to do early on so that you have got credible engagement that feels like those that are going to use the building have got a sort of a buy-in and an influence, because ultimately it's down to those to make that building a success. It's not like retrofit is not a one and done thing. It's got to be something that is sort of managed as and the relationship exists. This is why actually community engagement and centering kind of the community experience, but getting people who are local to that project involved as well is quite important. So it's a really sticky space, and it isn't easy, but it's absolutely necessary, and it takes a bit of a mindset shift to really engage with that. So yeah, but it's not like you do, there are skills, as Tab was suggesting, just with even these sort of hand signals in ACAM when we even communicate with each other. There's a whole bit of facilitation training that we have to go through to understand how best to like pull out voices and when to do it. So it is, I mean, I would love to see like how that gets embedded in the project, and just to give it sort of due consideration, because I think it does matter. Anyway, we could talk about that for a long time, but hopefully that's given you something.
Yeah, Natasha or Kate, do you want to add anything on community engagement? Because yeah, people go, oh no, but
I think with community engagement, just because it might be potentially a bit difficult, you're engaging a group of people that might not usually feel agency in being able to own the buildings and the spaces that they inhabit. And I think that if there are bits of difficulty there, it's worth it, because that's how you know that you're building spaces for people, and maybe it's the way that it's being described isn't quite being understood, and it's a really good way of challenging your opinion as a professional in this industry. The way I see buildings, the way Sarah, Kate, Tab see buildings is going to be different from the layperson, be different from a child, you know, and they have every right to enjoy the spaces that are meant to be designed for them. And so I don't know, it's not really an answer. It's more of a, it's difficult, but it needs to be done because we have a duty to deliver spaces for people.
Yeah.
There are some examples. Oh, sorry, Kate, after you.
No, I was just going to add, I think something that we find really useful is being really clear about what the purpose of the engagement is and what you want to get out of it as a design team, and what you want the community to get out of it as well. There's nothing worse than having these events and things and having no agenda, or, you know, and you're just showing designs or you're showing a site or whatever, and people will think that they can comment freely on anything and ask for a stadium in their local park, or, you know, whatever it is. You know, so we need to set kind of parameters so that everyone's on the same page. And then I think it's another important tool is feeding back to the community afterwards, how you've listened to them and how you've responded, and which bits you're carrying on with and which bits you might not be, and the reasons why.
Thank you. Can we, so another anonymous attendee, can we build up? If so, if yes, what is the limit? So not from the front facade, but going backwards, then yes. Limits? What's sustainable? What the use is? How much it'll take the heat? How sustainable it is? Yeah, you tell us. How will you decide which scheme will win the competition? So, as I said, we have space for up to 20 teams. What we generally do is then shortlist down to 8, and then those 8, within those 8 shortlisted teams, we will invite to Hereford for a live final in front of invited judges who are professionals from across the industry. You might be looking at some of your judges now, but we've yet to go out to approach anybody in judging. That tends to come in sort of into next year. And as in last year, so that's what we've done over the last 2 years. And yeah, our judges worked long and hard. They understand and they see exactly what each team member has put into it. They're often blown away by it, and often go out and get approached to participants to come and work for that company. So, you know, you've got all sorts of opportunities that maybe don't appear first, like within the competition brief. So learning from your peers, interacting with the wider industry, interacting with professionals, go and chase people on LinkedIn, go and stalk them, go and in the nicest possible manner, you know, and go and ask them for their advice. I hope that answers that. Thanks, Cypron, who's saying, yeah, great for organising it. And then Oliver, so PASS 2035. So I'm not sure I could expect the role of a retrofit coordinator. Sarah, maybe you've got more idea on PASS 2035. But I know our 2 speakers on webinar 4 have both done retrofit, and I've got a feeling that they both are retrofit coordinators. So we have Gervais and Florence, who will both be talking then. But I think that is down to our last question. Any final words from each of you about either where to start or
I think we said about like using communities that exist and asking and getting involved. So yeah, use LinkedIn, join ACAN, use all of the network opportunities that you have, and you know, these networks exist as knowledge sharing platforms, and you know, they're open to everybody to engage with. So definitely use them, because there's a lot of learning to be had that doesn't come from sort of textbooks or library sources, because as I said, a lot of this is still quite like test bed stuff. So yeah, and good luck.
thanks, Sarah. Natasha?
No, nothing more to add there, really. Yeah, it's just I'm excited to see what people come up with. Really be creative about it. Yeah. Oh, maybe look up regenerative design principles as well, just to throw that in the mix.
Yeah, no, really good tip. Kate?
Yeah, I suppose from our perspective, it would be getting to know the site and what's there at the moment, what you want to work with, what you want to retain, and then what is its potential and how it can function in the future. What kind of features can it support, and really push the boundaries. Try and be innovative. You know, work across disciplines. Ask each other lots of questions, and yeah, good luck. Can't wait to see what you come up with.
One last little thing on the community engagement I was just thinking about is check out the work of Civic Square in Birmingham, and a project that they were doing. a lot of us were involved in Retrofit Reimagined during the summer. Have a look at that and just see some of the examples of how they have engaged in the community and how it is a sort of a slow process of embedding into the community, but it's quite amazing. So check out their work.
No, brilliant, Sarah. It was yeah, it was so good to see. I'm so sorry I couldn't attend. Yeah, a huge thank you to all of you for giving up your time and you know, coming and speaking to our wider audience. This is being recorded. It will be on our YouTube channel, which is very easy to find. Can I ask you as speakers, you know, if you mention some of the fantastic resources, we'd like to be able to pass those on to our students. So each team will get a Miro board, which will have all the links. But again, we'd like to also, you know, send them out and share these resources as widely as we can, because although we think we just we're repeating the same message, there's more people coming to this message all the time. So no, really, really thank you. Thank you all for that. I'm just going back to screen share. I figure which one I'm sharing. I was saying, so all the challenge information is on the Timber Development UK website. Come and join us next week on the 22nd of November, where the Passivhaus Trust will take over the evening to talk about NFIT standards. On the 29th of November, the AECB will come and take over to talk about the AECB standards. And then on the 6th of December, Retrofit detailing for a timber frame. So we'll have Beth Williams, Florence Collier, and Gervais, and I can never say his surname, I'm going to call him Gervais M. Will come and you know, give you more in-depth information. And then following the webinar on the 6th of December, we will have a team building exercise where we'll move to Zoom meetings as opposed to Zoom webinar. And again, on the 7th of December. Please spread as widely as you can. We'd love to get as many people as we can involved so that you all get to learn from each other and we can all do things better than our generations have. And with that, I'll just say thank you all.
Thanks,
Tab.
Tab.
Yep. Thanks.
Thanks, Tab. Good luck, everyone.
Yep. Good
Thanks,
luck.
everyone.
Bye.